Hey y'all, welcome back again to another episode of Healthy Design. We'll keep talking about some of the treatment side of things for SNPs. We'll get into a few SNPs and what you do for them, not so much what they do. We'll kind of cover that briefly just as a reminder. But we'll talk more about the soak and scrub protocol first. We talked about it previously, but just very generally and as a quick overview. So we'll get a little bit more in depth with that. And then we'll move on to talking about some of the spot cleaning for some of the different SNPs. Again, this stuff is, what Dr. Ben Lynch has listed in his book. I'm not giving everything that he has in the book. It would be a good idea for you guys to buy it if you like this information, because he's got a lot of good information in there that I haven't shared. And I think he does a great job of sharing it in a way that's easy to understand. It's not written at such a high level to where you can't make any sense of it. That wouldn't be helpful at all. But let's move into the soak and scrub. So he says to at least do that for 2 weeks. You can definitely do that longer, especially if you're getting great results. That's what I would recommend doing. I'd kind of milk it for all it's worth. And then once things stall, if you're still having issues, with some of the different SNPs, then you move on to the spot cleaning specifically for those. But I would work this soak and scrub as long as you can, because again, it's the foundations of health. We can't build a house on a shaky foundation, so we can't build our health on a shaky foundation. If we don't have these things in order, then we're either going to get no results when we move on to the spot cleaning, or those results are going to be lessened severely. So we want to try to make sure we have everything in order, kind of paving the way for us to have great results with everything. And like I said, maybe we do these things and we realize, oh, I don't have to do any of the spot cleaning. That's even better. But week one, with food, I like this because I do think it applies to a lot of people. Start to tune in and realize the difference between hunger and cravings. I do think a lot of people eat because they are craving a food rather than being hungry. I do think in our society that a lot of people just don't even know what hunger feels like, because we do pretty much have readily available food all the time. May not be healthy food, but it is abundant and we can get it. And so we don't always know the difference between hunger and cravings. And so that can make a big difference there. With that too, you can kind of tune in to how your symptoms respond to different foods. If you are eating more processed food, are your symptoms worse? When you're eating healthier foods, getting the leafy greens, are your symptoms better? Maybe. That way you can start to tune into some of those things. Another thing that's really important that I don't see people doing is chewing your food thoroughly. Most of the time I see people and they just take a bite and two or three, chews, and then they're swallowing. So they're swallowing this big hunk of food. That's going to be a lot harder for your body to break down than chewing food how you should. So you should chew your food so much that it's basically a liquid when you're ready to swallow it. What this does, it helps the saliva in our mouth to digest things. There's all kinds of enzymes in our saliva that's breaking things down. Plus, we have the mechanical breakdown of just the chewing itself. So we get a lot of digestion done in that very first phase. That means that our gut doesn't have to do as much later on. And so this can help us to absorb nutrients better, can decrease stress on the gut. So it can just have a big impact on things. For supplements, he does like to start with a just general multivitamin, but he does recommend getting one that has folinic acid and folate. So again, folinic, FOLINIC, not folic acid. And again, that folinic acid, helps out with the methylation pathway, helps out with the DNA base production, different things along those lines. Folate also helps with the methylation pathway and the different products we need from it. The two other things that he recommends that I really, really like and see a lot of benefits with people are electrolytes and adaptogens. Once I've added electrolytes in for people, I've seen them have a lot more energy, no cramping. So some of those things are pretty common and they improve with electrolytes. I love the adaptogens. I think they help to manage stress. They kind of just give your body a little buffer there. So it just helps to manage the stress that we're going to be dealt with um, on a daily basis, because again, we can't just eliminate all stress. So what I like about them is they're non-specific in a good way. So if things are a little high, they try to bring it down to a normal level. If things are a little too low, they try to bump them up towards a normal level. With the adaptogens, it's not about trying to get a super high level or getting a super low level. We just want it kind of where it needs to be, and that way it gives our body the resources it needs to be able to handle things. Detox is important. Again, I am not a big fan of the detox programs that are so elaborate. You take all these supplements and do all these different things. But I do think detoxification is important. And luckily, our body has several ways to do that. As long as we have everything else functioning well, that should be functioning well too. But there are definitely some things we can do to help out. First and foremost, let's try to limit our exposures as best we can. If you have plastic, don't heat it up in the microwave. Get glass instead. That way, you're not kind of getting some of those plastics to leak out and then eating that and different things. If you got to do some work around the house or maybe work on your car, and know you're going to be exposed to different chemicals, then wearing gloves, having ventilation, having a mask, different things like that may come in real handy just to limit that exposure as much as you can. Unfortunately, we can't eliminate all exposures, but at least we can, limit some of the ones we know about and kind of take those steps to keep that down. Some other things with detox, we need to sweat. Sometimes of the year that's a little easier. Right now we're filming this and it's December, so it's getting cooler, so harder to sweat. There's ways you can do it. Put on some more warm clothing and move around. But it's definitely going to be a little bit trickier in the summertime. Not so hard, especially where I live. Just go outside for a minute and you'll be sweating. It doesn't take long, but that helps out a lot. Just our body can kind of eliminate some of those toxins that way, and then just breathing. That's a big deal. A lot of people will end up holding their breath, so make sure you're breathing. The breathing side can help out on stress management too. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Sleep. I think we all know sleep's important. I think pretty much everybody knows the main things they should do to try to guarantee they're getting quality sleep, like turning off the electronics well before bedtime, no light in the room so it's completely black, no fights before bed, different things along those lines. Unfortunately, most of us don't do those things, but they can have a big impact on sleep. And again, we want good quality sleep that's restful, rejuvenating, because again, CDR, cell danger response, during sleep is kind of where we're completing that healing cycle and then ready to start the next day. So sleep's important. We should take it more seriously and do those little things and reap those benefits. Stress, get outside. That can make a big difference instead of being cooped up inside all the time. And then do like 5 minutes of stretching or yoga. So some gentle movement. And again, there can be some breathing with that. And then just breath work in general. The breath work doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can do different techniques like box breath and box breathing, different things along those lines. But one of the big things is just slow your breathing down to where you take 4 to 6 seconds to breathe in and 4 to 6 seconds to breathe out. I've seen this switch people from a sympathetic fight or flight state to a parasympathetic rest and digest state in less than a minute. So I do think it's something that can be kind of quick acting as far as dealing with stress and managing things. And with that too, you want to make sure you're not taking a deep breath in and going that slow. The only time we breathe deep is when we're short of breaths, like with exercise and other things, which is kind of a stressful state. So we don't want to kind of reinforce that stressful state when we're trying to go from a stressful state to a non-stressful state. So just try to breathe normally, but slower. All right, that's the main stuff for week 1. For week 2, about the only thing he added for food was to make sure there's no electronics with food. And so this is one I'm not very good with. A lot of times we will watch TV when we're eating and stuff too. Not always, but a good portion of the time. I don't seem to have too many issues. So I'm sure that's part of the reason why I haven't been as proactive about changing this. But if you're noticing you're having difficulty digesting food, this can make a big difference. Yeah, especially if you're watching things that are stressful, then you're putting your body in that stressful state. It's not going to digest food. That's not important then. You don't need to rest and digest when you've got a sympathetic state and the stress that you need to fight off, run away from, or freeze and hope it'll leave you alone and go away. So that can make a big difference. So it's something to keep in mind. Supplements that you can add in here, liposomal glutathione, and he's got different recommendations on kind of what dose to start with, when to increase it, when to decrease it. Remember his pulse method too, about when to kind of stop taking things. And you don't have to take something every single day. You might for a while, and then maybe you only need it once a week or even less often than that. Who knows? Just see kind of what your body needs and go from there. The one thing he added with detox was drinking filtered water. Um, Stress, meditation can be very helpful. I do like meditation. What I've kind of noticed with myself and others is the breath work's kind of more of an immediate response to stress, and meditation is more of a long-term response. So once you've been meditating consistently for a while, what you'll kind of notice is you'll be exposed to something that previously would have really stressed you out, and now it just doesn't bother you, or at least not nearly to the same magnitude. And so that's what I kind of see there. It kind of increases that resilience, robustness, and anti-fragility, which is what we want. Whereas the breath work can kind of help complete the stress cycle and kind of do it quickly. So they both have an important aspect to play in that, but it is different. And so I would try to combine both. And I mean, with the meditation, there is some breath work too. Um, Two other things. One that I'm really big on is don't watch the news. Me personally, I don't watch the news. I don't like it because I don't feel like they tell me the news anymore. They just tell me their opinion of the news or what they want me to think about the news. I would much rather they just told me the news and let me make up my own mind. But that's hard to find anywhere because they tend to have an agenda that they're trying to push. Um, I don't like that. So I don't watch it. And part of the reason I say this too is I've seen it multiple times where people are watching their news channel of choice. So they're not watching the one that they shouldn't like and should be getting them all riled up. They're watching the one they love and they want to watch, but yet their blood pressure's up, they're getting angry, they're in a stress state. And part of that is the news tends to focus more on the bad stuff than they do on the good, because the bad stuff tends to be more sensational, which brings in more views, which brings in more money for them. And so I think that's why things are the way they are. So I just don't recommend watching the news. You can know what's going on without watching the news 24/7 and be okay. Another thing is limit time on social media. Maybe not the best thing to tell you since this is social media, but no. Yeah, I do think there are some good things on social media. There are some things that focus on positive things, and you can watch some of that. We still don't need to be on the phone all the time, computer or watching TV, but a lot of social media is not good. It's people either showing only the good things in their life, or they're showing things that aren't even actually happening in their life, making it appear so. And then that leads to others comparing themselves to that, like, well, I can't travel around like that, or I can't go do that. I don't have that money. And then we get in this comparison thing, and then we're stressed out, we're sad, there's no joy, and that's just not a good thing. So limit time on social media. All right, that's the soak and scrub part. Again, you can do that for several weeks. You don't just have to do it for 2 weeks. If you're getting great benefits, stick with it. Ride that out as long as you can. Try to keep it as simple as long as you can. And maybe that's all you need. For a lot of people, once they get those foundations in place, everything else takes care of itself. So you might not have to move on to the spot cleaning. But if you do, that's fine. There's still hope. There's still something to do. But yeah, try to milk that soak and scrub as long as you can. All right, so let's move on to the spot cleaning. We'll maybe just do one or two, just because the video is getting a little long already. But there is a specific order we want to do this in. So you probably have more than one snip. I would think it would be unlikely that somebody has all seven. It's definitely possible. But remember, we all have thousands of different SNPs. It's just a lot of them don't have any impact on our health or anything. But I do think it'd be fairly common to find somebody who has maybe two or three of these. And so you don't want to just move to the one you want to take care of and it's out of sequence. You want to definitely start with the first one and move down the line. That doesn't mean no matter what SNP you have going on. So let's say you have MTHFR, you don't necessarily start at DAO if you have no issues with the DAO. And Dr. Ben Lynch has like questionnaires, so you can figure out kind of which ones apply to you. But let's assume you have all seven. And so the order you want to treat them in, the spot cleaning side of things, is DAO first. Then you want to move on to PEMT, GST and GPX, COMT, MAOA, MTHFR, and then last but not least, NOS3. So as you can see, MTHFR is one that most people know about, but that's sixth in the line. So if you have some of those before it, you want to treat them first, because what you may find is once you take care of those in front of it, now it can function the way it was meant to be without anything specifically for it. So that's the reason for doing this. So let's move on to DAO. DAO, we need to address the microbiome because remember, it involves histamine and our gut health. and that can play a role with immune function and things too. But some of the things for our microbiome health, probiotics can be very handy. I do tend to like the blends better than more specific strains. There are some specific strains that can help break down histamine, so they can be viable. A lot of times, what we see though is all the strains have not been studied. So a new study will come out testing a specific strain on some kind of health condition and show it's helpful. And that's a good thing, but a lot of times that'll lead people to think, oh, we can only use that strain to treat that health condition. But a lot of times there's other research showing that the blend gave very similar results as doing that specific strain. So that's why I like using the blend. Another thing that can be very helpful is Espellardi. I think that's how you pronounce it. But a lot of people refer to it as a probiotic. It's not, it's a yeast. If it's yeast, it's not bacteria, so it can't technically be a probiotic. And then you might need some different supplements that can help out for gut inflammation, leaky gut, different things along those lines. Glutamine is an amino acid that's involved in our gut lining, so it can be helpful. Marshmallow root, zinc carnosine is something that can be really helpful for ulcerative colitis or ulcers in general. It just kind of helps to coat the stomach lining, so that can help decrease the inflammation, help things heal, and then that can lead to better absorption of nutrients and digestion and different things, which is good. Um, Something else to keep in mind: aspirin and NSAIDs can increase histamine release. So if you're taking those for whatever reason, maybe try to deal with the underlying cause there so you don't need those medications anymore, or find a different medication that can give you some of the same benefits without the histamine issues. Um, Again, there are some histamine blocking supplements. They can come in handy. Quercetin's one, luteolin, different things like that can play a role. And you'll see these used a lot of times if people have MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome. So, they can be helpful, but again, you need foundation and order and things too. Don't just jump to those things. The last thing that can be helpful for this is actually some of the stuff that comes in the next SNP, PEMT. Some of those supplements that are helping with cell membrane health can be helpful too, because again, we have cells in our gut lining, so it kind of makes sense. So let's move on to the last one for today. PEMT, again, involved with our cell membranes. We need healthy cell membranes, so we have healthy cells, and with healthy cells, we have a healthy body. So that's very important. And some things to keep in mind here: if you're a woman and you're pregnant and breastfeeding, or breastfeeding, I guess you wouldn't technically be breastfeeding if you're pregnant. Can happen, but you're going to probably need a little bit more support for the PEMT gene in that case. Also, what a lot of women will notice is after they've made that transition to menopause, that PEMT gene probably needs more support than what it did before. Maybe it needed nothing before, now it needs a little bit, or maybe now it needs a lot and only needed a little bit before. But that can make a difference on things. Again, estrogen plays a role there as well. And then the two supplements that can really help out here: phosphatidylcholine and creatine. You can get choline in food, eggs, red meat, different things like that can be really good sources of it. If you need a supplement, phosphatidylcholine is probably the way to go. It's in a usable form that can be part of the cell membranes, make them healthy. And then creatine is really important for energy. It's been well studied for muscle building, athletic performance. They're starting to do more looking at it with the brain. And again, it's involved in the energy production in our body. So for every cell, it could be really important because it's involved in that. So it wouldn't surprise me. All speculation on my part, but it wouldn't surprise me if it has many benefits for all the cells in our body, not just muscle and brain. It does kind of appear from the research that the muscles will kind of take it over first, and then the brain will get what it needs, and then maybe there's some left over for the rest of the body after that. So we'll keep an eye on the research, see how things go with that. But that's it for today. Sorry if I was talking a lot. Hopefully Stormy wasn't too loud playing too. She's definitely energetic, so hopefully that worked out all right. But I appreciate you guys watching this. Let me know if you have any questions. We'll finish this up next week talking about the other SNPs and be all done with this, and then we'll probably move on to like cells. I think maybe getting some of the background on that will come in handy. I got a new textbook that I'm going through and reading too, so just some light reading, molecular biology of the cell. But again, thanks guys for watching. I appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. And Crazy Stormy and I will see you guys next time. Bye.